Eli and Mara Reynolds had always dreamed of a simpler life, far from the towering skyscrapers and endless noise of Earth's megacities. When they moved to the remote colony of Naxos, a quiet planet on the outskirts of the Galactic Union, it felt like the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. The planet, known for its wide, rolling fields and clear skies, was a haven for those seeking peace. Their home sat atop a gentle hill, surrounded by greenery and distant mountain ranges, offering the couple the tranquility they had craved. For the first few years, life had been idyllic. Eli worked as a mechanic, helping repair farming equipment and space vehicles for the small settlement, while Mara focused on growing crops and maintaining their homestead. Their bond was strong, forged through years of working side by side, and they found solace in the simplicity of their routine. Their neighbor, Thierry, had been one of the first to welcome them when they arrived on Naxos. She was a Xelian, an alien species known for their otherworldly beauty. With her deep, azure skin, silver hair that shimmered like starlight, and graceful demeanor, Thierry was striking. Despite her stunning appearance, she was humble and kind, a regular presence at community gatherings. She had shared meals with them, laughed with them, and had even helped Mara in the garden on more than one occasion. Over time, Thierry had become a part of their lives, but never did Mara suspect that there was anything more than friendship between them. She appreciated Thierry's quiet strength, her calmness, and her ability to make anyone feel at ease. Naxos was a place of community and connection, and their little corner of the world felt like a sanctuary. It was far from the drama and complications of galactic politics, far from the chaos of other worlds. But Mara had no idea just how fragile that sense of peace was. It was a crisp evening when Mara first felt the tremor beneath the surface of her perfect life. Eli had been out later than usual, working on a nearby farm's transport shuttle, and Mara had spent the evening alone, tending to small tasks around the house. As she tidied up, she noticed Eli's communicator flashing on the counter. A message had come through, something he had forgotten to check before heading out. Mara's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't the type to snoop, but something about the message felt off. Maybe it was because Eli hadn't mentioned anything about work messages lately, or maybe it was just the stillness of the evening amplifying her unease. Whatever the reason, Mara's fingers moved almost instinctively, unlocking the device to check the message. Her breath caught in her throat. It was from Thierry. The text was short, but it carried a weight that made Mara's stomach churn. "I've been feeling strange lately, Eli. I need to talk to you. We can't hide this forever." Mara blinked, her mind struggling to process the implications of those words. What couldn't they hide? What had been going on between Eli and Thierry? She read the message again, hoping she had misunderstood, but the words stayed the same, staring back at her like an accusation. Her chest tightened as questions flooded her mind. Was there something more between her husband and Thierry? She had never suspected Eli of being unfaithful, and the thought that he could betray her with their beautiful neighbor felt like a sharp, unexpected blow. She had always trusted him, believed in the solidity of their marriage, and now it felt as though the ground was shifting beneath her feet. The door creaked open, and Eli stepped in, wiping his hands on a rag, his face tired but relaxed. "Hey, love," he said, his voice casual, as if nothing had changed. Mara couldn't move. The communicator was still in her hand, and her heart pounded in her chest. She felt a wave of nausea rise within her as she looked at him, standing there, oblivious to the storm that was brewing in her mind. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight, barely able to hold back the rising tide of emotion. Eli's brow furrowed, concern flashing across his face. "What's wrong?" Mara held up the communicator, her hand trembling slightly. "What is this?" she asked, her voice cracking. "What have you been hiding from me, Eli?" Eli's eyes widened as he saw the message, his face paling. For a moment, the room seemed to freeze. The weight of the silence was suffocating. Mara, it's not what you think," he stammered, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed him. "Then what is it?" Mara demanded, her voice rising. "What does Thierry mean by we can't hide this? What have you done?" Eli took a deep breath, his hands clenching at his sides. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said softly. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." Mara felt like the air had been knocked out of her. She stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling inside her. A mistake? A moment of weakness? Are you saying you slept with her? Eli couldn't meet her eyes. Yes, he whispered. And now? She's pregnant. Mara stood frozen, her mind reeling. Eli's words echoed in her ears. She's pregnant. It didn't seem real. How could this have happened? The man she loved, the life they had built together, the trust they had shared, it all felt like it was crumbling into dust before her eyes. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, her chest tight with the weight of betrayal. Her mind raced back over the past months, every interaction with Thierry now viewed in a different, darker light. The laughter, the shared meals, the moments of easy conversation, all tainted by the knowledge of what had been happening behind her back. How could you do this? Mara's voice trembled as she stared at Eli, tears brimming in her eyes. How could you betray me like this? Eli's face was filled with regret, but no matter how much sorrow he showed, it couldn't undo what he had done. Mara, I didn't plan this. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake. And a mistake? Mara interrupted, her voice rising with anger. Getting her pregnant is not a mistake, Eli. It's a choice you made behind my back. Eli stepped toward her, his hands raised as if to comfort her, but Mara stepped back, the distance between them feeling like a chasm. I never wanted to hurt you, Eli said softly, his voice thick with emotion. You have to believe me, Mara. I still love you. Mara shook her head, her tears spilling over now. How can you say that? How can you love me and do this? What about our life together? Our marriage? Eli's voice broke. I don't know. I was weak. I let my guard down, and I failed you. But I never stopped loving you, Mara. I swear that. Mara's hands clenched into fists as she tried to process the enormity of the situation. The trust between them had been shattered, and no matter what Eli said, she couldn't shake the image of him with Thierry, of their neighbor, now carrying his child. The thought twisted her insides with a mix of hurt and rage. You need to leave, Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper, but filled with finality. I can't look at you right now. Eli stood still for a moment, as if the words hadn't registered, then slowly nodded. Mara, I'm so sorry, he said, but his words did nothing to heal the wounds that had just been ripped open. Without another word, he turned and walked out the door, leaving Mara alone in the suffocating silence of their home. As the door clicked shut, Mara crumpled to the floor, her tears flowing freely now. The weight of the betrayal crushed her, and for the first time in her life, she felt utterly lost. As if the foundation of everything she had believed in had been pulled out from under her. The next day, Mara knew what she had to do. She couldn't move forward without confronting Thierry, without understanding how their neighbor had allowed this to happen. Thierry had been part of their lives, a friend, someone Mara had trusted. How could she have done this? Mara didn't bother announcing her arrival at Thierry's home. She stormed over to the sleek, metallic structure that stood just beyond the field that separated their properties, her emotions a storm raging inside her. She knocked hard on the door, her anger propelling her forward. The door slid open, and there stood Thierry, her serene face showing surprise. For a moment, the sight of her made Mara's stomach churn. Thierry's beautiful, alien features, the shimmering silver hair, the flawless blue skin, looked so composed, so otherworldly. And yet, she had been the source of Mara's pain, the catalyst for this unbearable rift in her marriage. Mara, Thierry began, her voice soft, but Mara cut her off. Why? Mara's voice was sharp, filled with hurt and accusation. How could you do this to me, to us? Thierry's silver eyes clouded with emotion, and she stepped back, gesturing for Mara to enter. Mara hesitated but stepped inside, unwilling to back down from the confrontation. The inside of Thierry's home was calm, as if it were an extension of the alien woman herself. But there was no calm in Mara's heart. I never meant to hurt you, Thierry said quietly as she led Mara to a seat. I didn't plan for any of this. Mara couldn't hold back her anger. Then how did it happen? Eli told me everything. You're pregnant with his child. You came into our home. You pretended to be our friend, and now you've destroyed everything. Thierry sat down across from Mara, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them in her lap. For the first time, Mara saw vulnerability in her, something beyond the alien grace and calm that Thierry always exuded. I didn't mean to betray your trust, Mara, Thierry said softly, her voice filled with sorrow. Eli and I, there was a connection. I can't explain it, but it wasn't planned. It just happened. Just happened? Mara's voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. You knew he was my husband. You knew what this would do to us. Tiri's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her usually composed demeanor breaking. I know I should have stopped it, but I didn't. And now I have to live with that. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but you deserve to hear the truth. Mara sat in silence for a moment, her mind reeling. She had expected anger, expected Tiri to defend her actions, but instead, all she saw was regret. It didn't soften the pain, but it left her feeling hollow, as if there were no clear answers, only the wreckage of what had been. And what about the child? Mara asked, her voice quieter now. What are you going to do? Tiri looked down, her hands resting on her stomach as if she were already feeling the life growing inside her. I'll raise the child. Alone if I must. I don't expect Eli to abandon you for me. This wasn't supposed to happen, but now it has, and I have to take responsibility. Mara stood up, unable to stay any longer. The weight of the situation felt too much to bear, and every word only deepened the sense of betrayal she carried. I don't know how to move forward, Mara said, her voice strained. But I can't look at you or Eli without feeling like my life has fallen apart. Tiri nodded, her face filled with sorrow. I understand. I'm so sorry, Mara, truly. Mara didn't respond. She turned and left Tiri's home, her heart heavy and her mind racing with the question of what to do next. She had confronted the truth, but now the hard part lay ahead, how to live with it. Mara returned home after her confrontation with Tiri, her emotions a whirlwind of anger, sorrow, and confusion. The house, once a place of peace and comfort, now felt foreign, as though the betrayal had seeped into its very walls. Every corner reminded her of the life she had shared with Eli, the laughter, the quiet moments, the trust. And now, all of that was shattered. Eli had not returned home since she asked him to leave. She knew he was staying with a friend in the settlement, giving her the space she had demanded. But the silence in the house was oppressive. She longed for answers, yet dreaded hearing them. The reality of Eli's betrayal weighed on her like a stone. How could their marriage survive this? Could she ever look at him the same way, knowing what had happened between him and Tiri? As she sat on the edge of their bed, staring out the window at the rolling fields of Naxos, Mara's mind wandered back to simpler times. She remembered their decision to leave Earth and build a life together on this distant planet, free from the chaos of their past lives. They had come here seeking a new beginning, but instead, it felt like their past mistakes had caught up with them in the worst possible way. The door creaked open, and Eli stepped inside, his face drawn and weary. Mara's chest tightened at the sight of him. He looked just as broken as she felt, but that didn't lessen the hurt. Mara, he began quietly, standing near the doorway as if afraid to come closer. I didn't want to come back until you were ready to talk. She didn't respond immediately, her eyes fixed on the view outside. When she finally spoke, her voice was strained, heavy with the weight of everything she was holding inside. I don't even know where to begin, Eli. You've destroyed us. I know, Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. But I'm here, ready to do whatever it takes to fix this, to fix us. Mara turned to face him, her eyes searching his for the man she had loved for so many years. How do you expect to fix this? You got another woman pregnant, Eli. That's not something you can just apologize for and expect everything to go back to normal. Eli's shoulders sagged, his face etched with regret. I know I can't undo what's happened, but I swear to you it meant nothing. It was a mistake, a terrible, thoughtless mistake. Tiri and it wasn't about love. I never stopped loving you. Mara's chest tightened, her emotions a storm inside her. Then why did it happen? If you loved me, how could you do this? Eli ran a hand through his hair, his frustration palpable. I don't know, Mara. I was weak. I let my guard down, and I made the worst mistake of my life. But it's you I want. It's you I've always wanted. Mara stood, the intensity of her emotions finally breaking through. But it's not just about what you want, Eli. There's a child involved now. Your child. How do I live with that? How do I wake up every morning knowing that our neighbor is raising your child? Eli stepped closer, his voice desperate. I'll take responsibility for the child. I'll support Tiri and the baby, but it doesn't mean I'm leaving you. I want to be with you, Mara. We can get through this if we're together. Mara shook her head, the pain overwhelming. I don't know if I can live with this. You didn't just betray me. You created a life with someone else. And now we're tied to that forever. The silence between them was heavy, neither knowing what to say. Eli stood there, his hands at his sides, as if waiting for Mara to make a decision that even he wasn't sure would go his way. Days passed, and Mara remained locked in an emotional limbo, unsure of how to move forward. She couldn't escape the reality of Eli's infidelity, and every time she thought about the child growing inside Thierry, it felt like a fresh wound. Yet, despite the betrayal, Mara couldn't ignore the love she still felt for Eli. It lingered beneath the hurt, stubborn and unwavering. Mara spent most of her time wandering the fields surrounding their home, seeking solace in the beauty of the landscape. Naxos was a planet of contrasts. Its serene beauty stood in stark opposition to the turmoil inside her. The gentle winds and vibrant sunsets should have brought her peace, but instead they served as a reminder of the life she had once imagined here. A life that now seemed impossible to reclaim. One evening, as Mara sat by the edge of a small stream that ran through their property, she heard footsteps approaching. She didn't need to turn to know it was Eli. His presence was as familiar to her as the sound of her own breath. He stopped a few feet away, unsure of whether to speak. I don't know how to fix this, Mara, Eli finally said, his voice raw. I've gone over it 1,000 times in my head, and I still don't know how to make it right. But I'm not giving up on us. I can't. Mara's gaze remained fixed on the water, its steady flow a stark contrast to the chaos inside her. I don't know if it can be fixed, Eli, she said softly. Every time I think about you with her, about the child, it feels like a knife twisting inside me. Eli sat down beside her, his expression one of quiet desperation. I can't take back what happened, but I can be better. For you, for us, I'll do whatever it takes. Mara finally turned to him, her eyes filled with pain and uncertainty. But what about Thierry? What about the child? This isn't just about you and me anymore, Eli. We can't just shut her out. She's carrying your baby. That's something we'll have to live with for the rest of our lives. Eli nodded, his face pale with the weight of that truth. I know, and I'll be there for the child. I'll support Thierry. But my heart belongs to you. I need you to believe that. Mara stared at him, her emotions swirling like the water in the stream beside them. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that their love could survive this, that they could rebuild what had been broken. But the reality of their situation felt like an insurmountable obstacle. I don't know if I can, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Every time I look at you, I see her. I see what you did, and I don't know how to stop that. Eli reached out, gently taking her hand. Please, Mara, don't let this be the end of us. We've been through too much together to let it all fall apart now. I love you. I always have. Mara looked down at their joined hands, the warmth of his touch familiar but foreign at the same time. She wanted to pull away, to protect herself from further hurt, but part of her longed to hold on, to fight for the life they had built. But could she really forgive him? Could she find a way to live with the knowledge of what he had done? And could she accept the child that would be a constant reminder of Eli's betrayal? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields, Mara knew she had to make a choice that would either break her heart or bind it to Eli's once more. Mara spent the following days in a fog, her mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. She had spent so long building a life with Eli, and now everything felt fractured, delicate, like glass teetering on the edge of shattering. No matter how much she wanted to repair their relationship, there was no easy path forward. The child, Thierry's pregnancy, Eli's betrayal, they were obstacles she could not simply will away. One afternoon, as she sat by the window watching the distant horizon, Mara heard a soft knock at the door. It wasn't Eli this time. He had respected her space and hadn't returned for days. When she opened the door, she was surprised to see Thierry standing there, her expression nervous and uncertain. Mara, may I speak with you? Thierry asked, her voice tentative, her alien beauty striking as always, though there was a weariness to her that hadn't been there before. Mara hesitated, but stepped aside, allowing Thierry into the house. She led her to the kitchen, where the tension hung in the air like a dense fog. Tiri stood across from Mara at the small wooden table, her hands clasped together as if she were trying to find the right words. "I'm not here to cause more pain," Tiri began, her silver eyes soft but serious. "I wanted to talk to you because I think it's important that you know. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never intended to hurt you." Mara crossed her arms, trying to keep her emotions in check. "You say that, but it happened. You and Eli, you crossed a line, and now you're having his child. How do you expect me to just move past that?" Tiri's eyes shimmered with regret, and she nodded, accepting Mara's anger. "I don't expect you to. I don't expect you to forgive me or even forgive him. But I need you to understand that I don't want to come between you and Eli. This situation, it wasn't something I planned, but it's happening. I will raise this baby, but I will do it on my own if that's what you want." Mara blinked, surprised by Tiri's words. She had expected more defensiveness or even an attempt to justify what had happened. Instead, Tiri seemed resigned, her voice filled with genuine sorrow. It was clear that, despite the pregnancy, she did not want to upend Mara's life. "I'm not here to steal him away from you," Tiri continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I care for Eli, but I know he loves you. I can see it in his eyes every time he talks about you. I don't want to come between that." Mara felt her anger soften, though the pain still lingered. She didn't know what to say, caught between the hurt of her own heart and the vulnerability she saw in Tiri's eyes. This woman, this alien who had been part of her life for so long, was now carrying her husband's child, yet she didn't seem to want to tear Mara's world apart. "What do you want, Tiri?" Mara asked after a long silence. Tiri took a deep breath. "I want peace. I want to raise my child in a place where I'm not hated. I know I made a mistake, but I'm not asking you to take on the burden of this child. That's my responsibility. But I also don't want Eli to be forced into something that will tear him from you." Mara stared at the floor, her heart heavy with the weight of everything Tiri had said. There was no easy solution. But for the first time, she felt a sliver of understanding creeping in, an acknowledgement that Tiri wasn't the enemy. She was part of this broken situation, just like Mara and Eli, trying to navigate a future none of them had planned for. "I don't know what the future holds," Mara said, her voice quiet. "But I need time. I need space to figure out what I want, and I need you to give me that." Tiri nodded, her expression filled with relief. "Of course, I understand." With that, Tiri left the house, leaving Mara to grapple with the reality of their new and uncertain future. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a step toward something, perhaps not healing yet, but at least understanding. A week had passed since Tiri's visit, and Mara still hadn't fully processed what to do next. But she knew that avoiding Eli forever wasn't an option. The weight of the situation still bore down on her, but with each passing day, she found herself searching for answers, rather than simply drowning in her pain. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, casting everything in a warm golden light, Mara asked Eli to meet her at the stream where they had shared so many quiet moments. He arrived on time, his face filled with uncertainty, but also hope. They stood facing each other, the gentle sounds of the stream mingling with the distant hum of nature around them. "I've been thinking a lot," Mara began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "About us, about everything that's happened." Eli's eyes searched hers and he nodded. "I have too." Mara took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I can't pretend that what happened between you and Tiri didn't hurt me. It did, more than I can put into words. But I've come to realize something, Eli. This child, whether I like it or not, is a part of our lives now, a part of you, and I don't want to live the rest of my life in anger or bitterness." Eli's face softened, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Mara? Wait," Mara interrupted gently, holding up a hand. "I'm not saying I can just forget what you did. Trust takes time to rebuild, and I don't know how long it will take for me to truly forgive you. But I'm willing to try. I don't want to give up on us without trying." Eli exhaled a breath he had clearly been holding, his relief palpable. "I'll do anything, Mara. I'll prove to you every day that I'm committed to us." Mara nodded, her gaze softening as she looked at the man she had loved for so many years. "But there's something else we need to talk about. The child. Terry is going to raise that baby, but you have a responsibility too. You can't just walk away from that." Eli's expression shifted, the weight of the conversation settling on him once more. I know. I don't want to walk away. I want to be a part of the child's life, but not at the cost of losing you. Mara looked away for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then we need to figure out how to make this work. We need boundaries, Eli. I'm not saying I'll be a mother to this child, but I also can't have you divided between two worlds. We need to find a balance. Something that allows you to fulfill your responsibility without tearing us apart. Eli reached out, taking her hand in his. We'll figure it out, Mara. I swear we will. Mara met his gaze, the fire of determination in his eyes giving her a flicker of hope. It wasn't going to be easy. Their life had been irrevocably changed, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But for the first time, Mara felt like they had a chance. A chance to rebuild, a chance to heal. I'm willing to try, Mara said softly, her voice filled with quiet strength. But we have a lot of work to do, Eli. A lot of trust to rebuild. Eli nodded, his grip on her hand tightening. I'm not going anywhere, Mara. I'm with you, no matter what. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, they stood together, facing the uncertainty of the future with cautious hope. It would be a long journey, but they were ready to face it, step by step. Together. The following months were a test of Mara and Eli's relationship in ways neither of them could have anticipated. After their conversation by the stream, they had committed to finding a way forward. Together, but the path was not without its challenges. Each day seemed to bring a new hurdle, whether it was dealing with the awkwardness of Thierry's pregnancy or navigating their strained emotions as they attempted to rebuild the trust that had been broken. Mara took things slowly, setting clear boundaries with Eli. He was allowed to visit Thierry to check on the pregnancy, but Mara needed to know where he was and when he would be back. Transparency became their new foundation. Fragile but necessary. Eli respected her wishes, never pushing too far, always conscious of how delicate their situation was. Their moments together were often quiet, filled with long conversations that alternated between vulnerability and hesitation. Mara found herself watching him more closely, measuring his words, searching his face for signs of sincerity. It wasn't that she didn't want to trust him. It was that the betrayal had left scars that would take time to heal. One evening, as they sat on the porch overlooking the fields, Eli broke the silence that had settled between them. I've been thinking a lot about the baby, he said softly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Mara glanced at him, her heart tightening. The subject of the child had become a constant presence in their lives, even though it was still growing inside Thierry. What about it? She asked cautiously. I don't want you to feel like I'm putting the baby ahead of us, Eli said, his voice filled with a mix of guilt and determination. But I want to be a good father. I need to be. Mara nodded slowly, understanding his struggle. I know, and I don't want to stand in the way of that, Eli. But we need to be realistic about what that means for us. I'm not asking you to abandon the child, but I need to know that you're fully committed to making our marriage work too. Eli turned to face her, his expression serious. I am, Mara. I'm committed to both. I know that's going to be hard, but I believe we can figure this out. Mara looked into his eyes, searching for the truth in his words. She wanted to believe him, and maybe for the first time since everything had come crashing down, she felt a glimmer of hope that they could survive this. But there was still so much uncertainty. What about Thierry? Mara asked, her voice quieter now. How do we keep things from getting more complicated with her? Eli sighed, running a hand through his hair. Thierry has been understanding. She doesn't expect me to be a full-time father, but I think she wants me to be involved. We've talked about it. And she knows that my priority is you. Mara appreciated his honesty, though it didn't make the situation any less painful. She wasn't ready to fully embrace the idea of co-parenting, even if it was at arm's length. But she also knew that this child wasn't going to disappear. It was a reality they both had to face, no matter how uncomfortable it made her. I don't know if I'll ever be able to be part of that child's life, Mara said after a long pause. I'm not saying never, but right now, it's just too hard. Eli nodded, his expression one of quiet understanding. I won't push you, we'll take it one day at a time. That night, as they sat together under the stars, Mara felt a sense of tentative peace. Their future was still uncertain, but they had made it this far. And for now, that was enough. The day Thierry gave birth was both surreal and emotional for everyone involved. Eli had been by her side at the clinic, while Mara had chosen to stay home, unsure if she was ready to face the reality of the situation just yet. When Eli returned later that evening, there was a mixture of joy and apprehension on his face. "She's beautiful, Mara," Eli said softly as he entered the house, his voice filled with a quiet awe. Thierry named her Lyra. Mara's chest tightened at the mention of the child. Lyra, a name that sounded both familiar and foreign. Part of her felt like this was a dream, a reality she hadn't chosen, but one she had to navigate nonetheless. She had expected to feel anger, jealousy, or resentment, but instead, what she felt most was exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion from the months of heartache and uncertainty. "How's Thierry?" Mara asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "She's doing well," Eli replied, sitting down beside her. "She asked if you wanted to meet Lyra, but I told her it was up to you." Mara bit her lip, her mind racing. The thought of meeting the baby, the child that represented everything that had fractured her world, filled her with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Could she handle it? Could she face the child and not crumble under the weight of what it symbolized? "I don't know if I'm ready," Mara admitted, her voice small. It's a lot." Eli reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. We can take this at your pace." Mara appreciated his patience, but she also knew that avoiding the situation forever wasn't an option. The baby was here, and it wasn't going away. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she considered her next words. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. "But for now, I just need time." Eli nodded, squeezing her hand. "Whatever you need, Mara, I'm here." The following days passed slowly, with Mara continuing to process the reality of the situation. She found herself thinking about the baby more often, wondering what she looked like, what her presence might mean for their future. Eli had visited Thierry and Lyra a few more times, but he never pressured Mara to join him, respecting her need for space. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Mara stood at the window, watching the light fade from the sky. She had been thinking about Lyra all day, her mind a whirlwind of emotions she couldn't quite pin down. Part of her wanted to keep the child at a distance to protect herself from the pain, but another part of her, a quieter, deeper part, wondered if maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to coexist with this new reality. After a long moment, Mara made her decision. She turned to Eli, who had just walked into the room, and spoke softly but firmly. "I want to meet her." Eli's eyes widened slightly, but there was a gentle smile on his face. "Are you sure?" Mara nodded, though her heart raced with uncertainty. "Yes. I don't know what will come of it, but I need to see her. I need to know." Later that day, Eli and Mara walked together to Thierry's home, where Lyra had been born just days before. As they approached, Mara's nerves fluttered, but she steadied herself with each step. This was her life now, messy, complicated, and imperfect. But it was still hers, and she was ready to face it. When Thierry opened the door, her face softened with gratitude, and she welcomed them inside. Mara's heart pounded as she looked at the tiny bundle cradled in Thierry's arms, Lyra, with her delicate features and shimmering silver-tinged skin. The baby opened her eyes, a curious, quiet gaze that seemed to hold the weight of a future not yet written. Mara stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. She had expected to feel resentment or sorrow, but what she felt was something else entirely, something softer, quieter. She didn't know if it was acceptance, but it was a start. "Would you like to hold her?" Thierry asked gently. Mara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Thierry handed the baby to her, and as Mara looked down at the child, she felt a strange calm wash over her. Lyra's small, delicate fingers curled around hers, and in that moment, Mara knew that this was her new beginning. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was the one she had. And she would find a way to live it, one step at a time.